difference, which translates in essence into a €35 value advantage of the high quality US soybean meal. The low quality US soybean meal, of course, has a much lower difference, and that basically sums up to €17 per metric ton. So in conclusion then, and I think my time is up, ingredient nutrient values determine feed quality. And it is, of course, very much a question of how we determine these nutrient values. They also determine, of course, as a consequence, animal performance, which are animals that are fed with that feed. Poor ingredient quality leads to increased feed costs and variable animal performance. And I should stress that in modern day broiler, pig, layer, or beef production, the homogeneity of a flock is probably as important as the simple performance or the final weight of the animal. Slaughterhouses want homogeneous pigs for further process. Poor ingredient quality is therefore difficult to handle and expensive to compensate for. Ingredient quality is inherently variable, and the entire challenge for the feed industry is how to handle that variability within the ingredients. And again, I'd like to remind you, that is 67% of my performance quality. That is 60% on average of my cost. That's a lot of money. Least cost formulation should be used and can be used to adjust for low ingredient quality, but leads to higher formula costs or decreased performance, as demonstrated in the soybean meal sample, where good US soybean meal can demand a higher price. I think I showed that, €35. That's basically all I have to present to you. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. And I'd like to leave you with a thought of a guy which has been much talked about, and maybe find some application for buyers and in ingredient markets. It's better to be roughly right than precisely wrong. I thank you for your attention.
Simple question. I think, did we relate the quality difference basically because of the protein solubility of the two meals you were talking about? Is the difference...
Well, the first example I gave you, the first two examples I gave you, the first example in particular had to do with protein solubility. Now, we assume that protein solubility is directly correlated to protein digestibility and therefore amino acid digestibility. And that's the entire premise on which protein solubility, KOH, urease index, PDI is based upon.
So that is the major difference why the other bean is other meal is
in the first example that I gave you. I tried to do this in a stepwise fashion with you. I don't know if you caught that. Showing you KOH differences, just protein solubility difference in the soybean meal. Then I went further to energy differences, and then I took the whole set.
The energy was done separately, not in relation with the KOH.
That was not related to KOH. In the first example.
I don't know, because I was just thinking KOH is more of a function of the plant and maybe not of the beans.
You're exactly right. And this is one of these interesting things that people like Cargill and Bunge, my friend Horst, and they do not always, I feel, pay sufficiently attention to that, because that is something that the crusher controls entirely.
That's right.
I mean, the solubility of protein, the digestibility of the protein is a crushing function that has nothing to do
with the bean.
With the bean.
That's all.
Thank you. Any more questions? I must have been very clear. Yeah, there you go.
John, hang on a second.
Is it on? How important is genetics in this equation? I mean, I can take an an average broiler versus something with better genetics? How much more?
You mean the animal genetics?
Yes, animal genetics.
Well,
What do you know?
yes, there is some difference in that, but there are differences between broilers. There are differences between pigs. There are different according to the genetics. We have fast-growing broilers and slow-growing broilers, and they will convert protein different and use energy different. But our nutritional knowledge and formulation knowledge at this moment does not really take a lot of that into consideration. My requirements change, and I can do that at the feed level. I can formulate, for instance, as I showed you in the earlier slides, a diet with higher energy and higher digestible amino acid values for fast-growing animals, and one with lower levels and therefore cheaper for slow-growing animals. That I can do, and the feed manufacturer and the broiler producers knows that. Pig producers know that too. If I want a fat carcass in a pig, for instance, as it is appreciated much more in Asia here than, for instance, in the US, I can probably do a fair amount by changing my standards, my requirement standards. But I do not change the ingredient evaluation for that. Yeah?
Any other questions for Jan? Horst?
Horst, I sure was. I left him a note there.
Would you like to respond to that?
Nothing to respond. I just have a question. I mean, you're talking about South American meal. The only thing I see over there is always 46%, so your reference must be the RG meal. Any recent studies you have done on the Brazilian?
No. These are studies that they take fair amount of money, because you basically have to have several houses, broiler houses.
We sponsor.
Hmm?
We will sponsor.
Actually, that was not sponsored by.
No, Horst just said that Bungie will sponsor some trials. Is that true?
No, they never sponsored the trial.
We can talk about that.